Hello everyone, greetings. I'm Dr. L. Santosh Kumar, Assistant Professor of English at Christianity College Autonomous, Bengaluru, Karnataka, India. And today, let us have a quick and a brief retrospection on the element subaltern literature, or to be more specific, let us have a quick glance on the Spivak essay of the selected extracts of our seminal work, Can the Subaltern Speak? And let me share my screen first. And in the contemporary times, this particular seminal essay is becoming the order of the day. And when we talk about Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, she is known for her various credentials, out of which two most important credentials are she is the one who translated Jacques Derrida's work of grammatology. And second most important thing, she is the one who is said to be the author or the pioneer to introduce one of the introduced the term subaltern literature. And of course, people like Ranajit Goga are there, but it was only Spivak who spoke about it in a very detailed manner. And most importantly, the first writer or the first critical writer to give a different dimension and a new perspective to this particular concept called hegemony or hegemonical discourses. And when we talk about the term subaltern, what do we understand or what we are supposed to contemplate on it? And more specifically, when we talk about subalternity in literature or when we talk about subaltern discourses to a greater extent, we all of us should understand one important aspect. That is, the term subaltern or the term subalternity is something a term, something most a recurring term which had been used by the people right from the good old past until now. And why do this particular term or why do this particular literature is gaining momentum to a greater extent? And what do these literary works or what do the writers who sprung from subaltern literature, what do they imply? What do they denote or connote a message to the literary world? That is something which is quite being traversed or which is something quite being researched by the people right from the good old past until now. And most importantly, when we talk about the idea of equality, equality is a term where people believe that it exists in the world. To be honest, equality is a term which exists in the form of a book, in the form of writing. But when it comes to reality, it is something which has to be retrospected. And most importantly, in the context of global issues, each and every country is having or undergoing different kind of oppression and suppression. And more specifically, in a country like India, still now there is the problem of caste discrimination is there, women-based discrimination is there, and there are so many feminists who condemn the idea of patriarchy to a greater extent. And more specifically, in the contemporary times, the idea of feminism is something which is being retrospected or which is being reinterpreted from a women-centered perspective and also from a male-centered perspective. And in the context of America, still now we talk about the racist issue. And people throughout the world, with reference to America, they can't deny by saying that racism do not exist in America. And even the recent death of John Fletcher, all those things is something quite indicative that marginalized issues are being prevalent throughout the world. Same thing with each and every other country, as how the Middle East nations, as how they are being occupied or how they are being attacked owing to the misrepresented labels which they undergo. So subaltern is something a term. Subaltern is not something a term. Subaltern is something a phenomenon which a painful phenomenon which always talks about the manipulated histories and manipulated truths and how these manipulated truths and how these manipulated histories they paved way for a falsified construction and how these falsified constructions in the later stages have become the original ideologies. And third most important thing here is that when we talk about the idea or the idea of marginality, The term marginalization in literature or the term marginality of literature is something a quite predominant term which we have been using it very frequently. And more specifically, according to the pioneer subaltern literature, they divided the element of subaltern into two different, that is the working class and the ruling class. And more specifically, now in the contemporary times, the concept of working class is something which is becoming outdated because each and every one represents the working class, and most importantly, the ideological construct behind it is something which has got a very deeper history. And we should also understand how these represented voices or how these ideologies they are playing a pivotal role. And we should also understand that is the ideological construct which is being created by us, or the ideological construct which has been paved way for so many truths. The ideological constructs which is said to be the binarical oppositions, as how these ideas are something a triggering phenomenon, because in the context of literature pertaining to marginalization there is a concept called geopardy, and most importantly in the context of India, the women in India, they undergo double jeopardy. First one, they are being marginalized in terms of gender. And second thing, there is terms of marginalization within internal. And more specifically, people would often claim that in a country like India, mother-in-laws are more powerful than the daughter-in-laws. Same thing like that when we talk about a subaltern perspective from the global issues, that is with reference to Afro-American, or with reference to any sort of gender-based or with any sort of global issues, they undergo a triple jeopardy. And to be more specific, in the context of Afro American, the first and foremost thing is that the people of black women, or more especially the black women, they are being first marginalized in terms of race. And second thing, the black women are being marginalized by the white women. And third most important thing is that black women are being marginalized even by their own men. So the element of subalternity or the element of marginalization is something which is quite quintessential. And also at the same time, we should also remember the context of tribal discourses, which is quite the painful syndrome in India. Most importantly, tribes are the only people in earth who are in tune with nature, and to talk it from their perspective and to talk it from a subaltern perspective, the word development is said to be something a negative term for tribal discourses. And also at the same time, we also should understand how these ideological constructs or how these falsified truths are something playing a pivotal role. And to be more specific, a famous poet called Desanta Karkata, who often claimed the fact by saying that I'm not your data, I'm not your word bank, and most importantly, I am not your ideological construct, and I'm not your place where dams and other places are being destroyed. So these represented voices of literature are something which has got the element of subalternity in it by default. And also all these voices, they often try to draw a line between personal and political. And when all these voices are being heard by the power structures, by default, they tend to ensure that not to record these voices or not to make these voices to heard for so many hours or for so many days. When the luminality or when the spatiality of these particular voices are being restricted by default, we all of us should understand that's how these voices are being glorified or how these voices were being restricted by the power structures which operate at great levels owing to political monopolizations. And most importantly, when we talk about representation, now in the context of Bharatan literature, we are supposed to label it as a representation of truths. It is no more representation, it is only a representation. And how these representations are creating a unifying discourse in the mindset of the readers. And the moment when we say that representation, it is quite clear it's quite evident for all of us to understand that these representations or these ideological constructs are something which is creating a syndrome, and these syndromes are something a unifying term. And also at the same time, we all of us should understand that is the ideological constructs or the ideology which is being inbuilt in the form of literary writing, or which is being made known to us by all these literary syndromes, are something the quite quintessential. And most importantly, literature, people they often say that to define or to understand literature is that creative fusion and imagination of facts. Whereas in the contemporary times, we can say that literature not only deal with the illusion, even though deal with the illusion, but only through that illusion one can understand the real meaning of life. So the concept of life narratives or the concept of life writing, all those things are said to be the birth are said to be birth or the watchwords of subaltern literature, and more specifically when misrepresented voices are being represented, when these misrepresented truths are being unheard, or when these misrepresented truths are being manipulated once again, by default, the element of subalternity it becomes more and more stronger. And more specifically, Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, in one of the recent lectures during the lockdown time, she just emphasized the fact by saying that one of the question was asked to her that do you think the concept subalternity do not exist? And at that time she gave a wonderful reply by saying that the element of subalternity will not be remote. Why she says is that if you want the element of subalternity to be removed, by default the human race should not exist. If human race not exist, by default we can strive for all sort of equality. And she also said that if subalterns and subalternity is no more, then by default I do not have a role to talk about any sort of marginalized voices here. So it is a well-known fact that we as a human beings, we all of us should strive for equality, not only in terms of paper and pen, but also in reality. And to be more specific, the more praxis we are, the more unifying and the more sustainable the world would be. Thank you.